Good afternoon to everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm delighted to welcome everybody to our September dialogue. And thank you also for joining us on the sacred Jewish day of Yom Kippur, which is a day of forgiveness and atonement and a day of reflection. My name is Tom Dennis. I'm the CEO of Serenity and Leadership. And we're premier conflict resolution, culture integration, and change specialists. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. G has been a policeman, as you've probably all seen in his profile. He was the first openly gay policeman in the British police force as a whole. We've worked with him a number of times now, and his personal journey and story is one that really touches me certainly in many, many ways. So I'm not going to say much more. G, you'll introduce yourself, and I know a lot of what you're going to be talking about is through your personal story. So G, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It was interesting when you asked me to do this talk, and you said you have 15 to 17 minutes. And you sort of sit there and think, how do you squeeze everything into 15 to 17 minutes? So I'm hoping that I will give somebody a bit of everything. A bit of a language warning. There will be some inappropriate language as we go through this session. It's in the context of what the session is about. So hopefully you'll understand that. And I would ask you not only to pay attention to what you're hearing, also pay attention to what you're interpreting. Because if you pay attention to what you interpret, you learn a bit more as well. So you become your own teacher in effect. Right, let me start. As Tom said, I used to be a police officer. And one of the things that used to hit me when I was a police officer, you go around and you take statements from people who have been either victims of crime or witnesses, etc. And I'd be sitting there taking details from a suspect or a witness or something like that, and they'll be describing what had happened, and I'll take the details. And they're very aware they're speaking to a police officer, and then suddenly I'll go, okay, so what was the ethnicity of the subject, of the suspect? And if I was with a white person, they suddenly became very aware that they were speaking to a black police officer. And you could see this confusion come on their face as if to say, what do I say here? What is the term of the day? And it used to sit there and always make me think, what does that do to people who don't really, are struggling to find their identity, that nobody really knows how to define you? Everyone's thinking, what do I say that's not going to cause offense? How does that affect your self-worth? How does that affect who you are? And it made me think about a lot of these things. It made me think about, and I think it's been the foundation of a lot of the work I do. How are we defined, and who defines us, and what labels are we given? To give you a flavor of what I mean, I'm going to read out a few things, and just pay attention to the reaction it gives you. And I'm speaking from my perspective here. Colored, white. Afro-Caribbean, white. Black, white. Visible minority ethnic, white. Ethnic minority, white. African Caribbean, white. Non-white, white. Ethnic, white. Urban, white. Negro, white. BAME, white. Coon, white. Nigger, white. Spade, white. Darky, white. Gollywog, white. Homosexual, straight. Gay, straight. LGBT, straight. LGBT plus, straight. LGBTQ, straight. LGBTQ plus, straight. Bent, straight. Faggot, straight. Shirt lifter, straight. Puff, straight. Queer, straight. homo, straight, Batman, straight. Listening to some of these words, for some of us can sit there and think these words are outdated, they're uncomfortable, we shouldn't be using these words today. But what if you live in a world where you can't choose not to hear those words? You can't choose not to engage with those words. For example, you're walking down the street and somebody shouts one of those words to you from a passing car, or you get shouted at from a block of flats and you don't know what window it's come from, or from the chants of a crowd in the stadium and you're playing football. We can talk about these things and say these words are not today's language, but we can't choose not to engage with them. Some of us, these are the words that are the soundtracks to our lives. And not only that, with some of these words, you're sitting there thinking, how do I describe myself? How do I get through some of these things? Let's take, we're talking about the term intersectionality. I am not a fan of the term intersectionality. And let me tell you why. Let me give you, there's an Oxford Dictionary definition. And it says, the interconnected nature of social categorizations, such as race, class, and gender, as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. Or another way, having multiple marginalized identities. The reason why I don't like this word, it focuses on what happens to me rather than who I am. They make me a victim or a survivor, not a thriver. And that's why I don't split myself up into different categories. I am just one person. Shouldn't the focus be on marginalization? Shouldn't the focus be on the behaviors that discriminate, the behaviors that marginalize, the behaviors that separate, rather than on the identity or how to categorize someone? What we're trying to do here is get rid of discrimination. What we're trying to do is work around discrimination. It's not about the person's, it's not about the person's identity. It's the discrimination that alienates them. When you hear some of these words, it can take a great internal battle with yourself to figure out where you come from and where you sit. For someone to say, for example, I'm Black and I'm gay, I wasn't able to say that openly for 40 years because I was scared of how people might feel it, how people might experience it, or the impact it might have. So I had to go in and ask myself who I am. And I think that's when it comes to looking at a lot of this stuff, it's about people's identity. It's about valuing people's identity. It's about seeing the person in front of you and not the label. I was at an event once. I like to be called G. Right? That's my name. That's my brand. And I remember being at an event where this woman came up who, very, shall we say, use the term of today, woke, right? And she said to me, what's your name? And I said, G. She goes, no, what's your full name? And I said, well, Gamal Turawa, but I like to be called G. And she said, no, I'm going to call you Gamal. And I said, no, I would like to be called G. That's what I like to be called. And she goes, no, you will not be called G. You will be called Gamal because that is your given name. And I sat there and I'm looking at this woman. And I remember people sitting around the table looking at me thinking, who gives you the right to decide who I should be? And I think that that's what happens with some of these labels and things, is that you go around to some places and before you've even opened your mouth, before you've even said who you are, people have assigned a label to you. And with that label comes a whole host of values, beliefs, expectations of who they think you should be, or the help they think you need. And to me, that's the problem with some of this stuff, because it erodes and has an impact on your identity. It has a big impact on your identity. And if your identity is constantly in flux, where do you ground yourself? You know, people talk about resilience, talk about having that resilience, but that resilience has to be worked for. Especially if you're from if we use the term marginalized group. All people want to be is be themselves. Not only that, I think when we sort of like limit people to either their color or their gender, we miss out on the richness of who that person is. You know, I said, you know, I'm a cop, I was a cop, but I'm a gay man. I'm also an uncle, I'm also a brother, I'm also a son, I'm also a writer, I'm also a lecturer. I am so many different things. I'm part Nigerian, I am part Jamaican, I am part British. I was brought up with white foster parents. I was an abused child. I've been homeless in a third world country. All of these things have shaped me. All of these things have made me who I am. And if we look at our stories, every single one of us has a story that is so multi-layered and so complex that we miss out on the richness of who we are when we don't value that. You know, when the footballers were getting abused, Rashid and Marcus and Rashid and Raheem and all those guys, it wasn't just the footballers that were getting abused. It was every person who was Black felt that remark. It wasn't that football, it was you were attacking someone's color. And that was felt by all of us. And whether it's color, gender, sexual orientation, once we start looking at those things, we miss what we're actually talking about. And what we're actually talking about is stopping that behavior. And I hope that when we have this dialogue this afternoon, we start to explore what this notion of labeling and identity actually means. I mean, I guess where we can use it for data purposes, but it's when we use it to impose an identity on someone. That's where it gets complex. That's where it gets ugly. That's where it gets painful. Is when we impose an identity on someone and don't give them ownership of it. And I think when we get to looking at this thing, there's a phrase I heard the other day, and it's like, the phrase was, be curious and not judgmental. And I kind of love that. And I think that that's what it's about. It's about taking the time to be curious, taking the time to understand and recognize or value someone's identity rather than assume what it is. How am I doing for time, Tom?
You got about three minutes to go if you want.
Right. Well, I'm going to sum it all up. If anybody came to me now and said to me, G, who are you? I'm G. I'm just me. That's who I am. Everything else is part of the richness of G. So when you see G, you see the richness of G in its full effect. And it's just appreciating. If I see you, it's recognizing and valuing the richness. My definition of diversity is knowing that you don't know, because it's not until you know that you don't know before you will begin to know. When you know you don't know, you stop making assumptions. Thank you. I hope I've given you food for thought there and something to galvanize a conversation or a debate.
I think you have. Thank you, Gene. That was very thought-provoking. So, G, can I just ask you to top and tail, really what's up for you having heard this dialogue? You're on mute.
Muted.
And that's the most profound thing I've ever said in my life. No, there was a phrase that was said to me many, many years ago when I started doing this work, and it was diversity is like a hedgehog. Everybody has a point. And listening to this, it's not about, to me, it's not about being right or being wrong. It's about being authentic. It's about being real. It's about being genuine. It's about being compassionate. It's about being caring. And that's what's coming up in this. When I'm listening to this, we're being respectful. This is what it's all about. It's not about, I'm right, you're wrong. It's about how we just see the things differently. And the first person I've got to understand is myself, and recognize where I sit with all of this stuff. A lot of the times we're trying to stand in a place of balancing ourselves out against the other, but actually our own footing is not strong enough yet. So we're always going to be off balance because I haven't figured out what this means to me first. And I think that's the first step. And then this is what these dialogues are about. And I've enjoyed listening to them. It's all about context, all about authenticity, all about truth, and all about gratitude to Tom for creating these dynamics.
Thank you, G. Thank you all. It's been wonderful, this session, and I really appreciate you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Organizing. Thank you, everyone.